Today we will find out how well the ported iron sleeve big bore kit has held up on the trail bike, and we'll also be exploring our thoughts and opinions on the JRL Carburetor. As many of you know, our hopes were not high when unboxing the big bore kit. Feel free to check out the link in the description to find out why. But in a nutshell, it was a mess and had the worst port work I've ever seen. Having already dealt with issues on a previous standard bore iron sleeve cylinder, I was not expecting much. But this kit had been requested by many viewers, so we gave it a shot. Before we dig back into the cylinder, let's talk about how its performance stacks up to its closest competitor, a ported YD100. Now, because we ported the cylinder before installation, and because the included piston is designed for a 40mm stroke, I can't give a fair comparison versus a standard 47mm cylinder or a short stroke kit. But I have noticed the cylinder does not have much top end, which might be a deal breaker to some builders. After about 6,500 RPMs, it just stops pulling. I suspect this may be due to terrible airflow at higher RPMs caused by the massive iron lips on the transfer ports. Some of this top end might come back to us later down the road as we find a jet kit that works with the JRL carburetor, but more on that later in the video. In low RPMs it feels as strong as the YD100, so we're good there. But where this cylinder really shines is the mid-range. Between 4,000 and 6,000 RPMs it pulls a bit stronger than my YD100, which is a considerable upgrade versus a stock cylinder. But there is a catch, and we'll get into that later. Anytime I start talking about performance on these cheap bikes, there's always a handful of comments telling me that in order to truly unlock these kits, you need a real MZ65 pipe, or any other number of dirt bike pipes. Every video I see of the MZ builds show that this is true, but at least right now, I can't justify buying a pipe that costs more than the motor. And besides, if I start pulling 50 miles an hour on a bicycle, I'm gonna die. We will touch back on the performance of this cylinder, as well as where I think it might shine in a bit, but for now, let's see if it's holding up any better than our first iron sleeve kit. Not including break-in, we have a little over 200 miles on this kit. And these are relatively hard miles, as I've been exclusively riding this bike on back roads as much as possible in dusty, hot conditions. Upon removing the head, we can see that she's running a bit richer than I would like. Running rich was my intention, but this is a bit excessive in my opinion, so we're going to knock the needle down a notch by moving the clip up. I suspect this is mid-range tuning because the bike starts great, idles perfect, and does not break up under full throttle. Basically, no four-stroking. On to what I'm mostly worried about, the cylinder walls. When we dug into our first iron sleeve kit, there was considerable gouging on the walls right after break-in. Thankfully, this time the cylinder feels almost perfect. I say almost because I noticed one small scratch line that I can just barely feel with my fingernails. This is obviously not ideal, but I'm okay with it for 3 reasons. 1. The cylinder was a train wreck upon arrival, so expectations were low. 2. This is not a high-performance motor that needs every last lick of perfection. And 3. Because this is not a lining that can chip away and cause the overheating/galling issues you get when the aluminum piston rubs against an aluminum wall, I don't think it will cause a catastrophic failure down the road. But only time will tell. For those of you who may not be familiar with what I'm talking about, but when a soft metal like aluminum rubs against a hard metal like iron, they can last for a long time. I'm not an expert, so I won't try to fake it, but just know this is why the lining inside a stock cylinder is so important. It's often a thin layer of metal that's quite a bit harder than aluminum. For now, let's move on over to the JRL Carburetor. I bought this carburetor a few months back and started using it on the Sutek, our daily driver. Once the big bore kit arrived, I moved it over to the trail bike. For both motors it ran great, and for some reason the needle adjustments make a bigger impact at wide open throttle on the JRL than they do on the NT Carb, which is important, and you'll see why in a bit. Key improvements that I've noticed on the JRL: the fuel inlet is moved further away from the body of the carburetor, making it much easier to install a thicker fuel line. A rubber boot that covers the throttle cable, a push drain valve, removal of the useless priming button, a metal throttle piston along with a more robust washer that makes on-the-fly adjustments easier, a stronger spring on the idle adjustment screw that prevents migration, a proper locking nut that helps prevent the choke lever from loosening up over time, and a tighter fit on the intake that helps reduce air leaks. As far as performance goes, I haven't noticed an improvement over the NT speed, but throttle response and return to idle seem to be a bit better. On both motors, I've been able to adjust the carburetor using only the needle jet. But sadly, if you find yourself in a situation that requires rejetting, it does not use the same jets as the NT carbs. As far as I can tell, it looks like the JRL uses the same jets as a Predator 212 carb, but I won't know until I try them, so just in case I'll be grabbing a set of drills to try the solder technique. In my opinion, I think the JRL carburetor is a perfect $10 upgrade for somebody who just wants a plug-and-play option that is a bit easier to tune as well, and is tired of dealing with all the headaches that the NT carburetors have to offer. Mine is not leaked, and the seals show no signs of failure over the past few months. As for the CDH iron sleeve kit, I don't think it's worth it. Yes, I absolutely love the performance it's giving me on the trail bike, but there was a lot of work involved in making it usable. As far as plug-and-play options go, this is definitely not one of them. If port work does not scare you and you're after a strong pulling motor, then it may be the way to go. But in my opinion, upgrading to a YD100 motor is probably by far the better option. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little video today, and until next time, ride safe.